what's the point of the Conservative Party and how did we get here? How did we get to this point? This country loves the Conservative Party. They are the natural party of government. Look how many years they've been in power for since the Second World War, and look how many years, like not many, that the Labour Party have been in power for. We are a centre-right country, generally speaking. So what is it? What is it that's gone wrong? And what do they do now? The Conservative Party got into power 14 years ago in the 2010 general election, but they were up against a Gordon Brown government who had had the banking crisis, and they'd been in power for a long time, 13 years of Labour, and they still didn't win. I mean, they got the most votes, but they needed to have a coalition with the Liberal Democrats in order to get in, and the finances were really struggling. So one of the first things the new Conservative coalition government did was introduce austerity. George Osborne stood up in the House of Commons and said, we're slashing spending here, we're slashing spending here. That's some pretty tough things to do. And of course, they say that they didn't want to do them. It's just what you're stuck doing this stuff. I'm still miserable, man. Especially when you're not popular enough to have won a full mandate, to have won a full election. And then they carried on, and then we got to the Brexit, which divided the country anyway. Famously 52-48, and you had Conservatives on Conservatives, Cameron on one side, and Boris Johnson and Michael Gove on the other. That split the Conservative Party. And then what happened next was it was tough. Theresa May took over, and there was massive infighting again, Conservative on Conservative action. You had Conservative MPs leaving the Conservative Party to join Change UK, I think it was called, like this brief party that had some people, Anna Soubry, Dominic Grieve. They had a famous meeting at Nando's. But they were a small enough party that they fit around a table in Nando's. And I bet they all had like lemon and herb. They were that kind of people. So you had the Conservative Party falling out. We had no clear idea of who the Conservative Party was or what was going on. And then Boris Johnson came in and he had a plan. You will have a view on what that plan was for Brexit. Some Conservatives voted against it. People like Philip Hammond, like decent people, voted Tory and being a Conservative MP for a very long time, very popular man. And Boris Johnson said, no, get out, binned him off from the party. But Boris Johnson was uniting the party and he was showing strength and leadership. And he's not the most popular guy at the time because he was quite belligerent about it. But he meant something, and he was doing it, and he was leading the party. And there was some unity, and he was popular in the country. How do I know he was popular in the country? Because we had the 2019 general election, and he was hugely popular. He won by miles. He'd made Brexit happen in some form. And obviously there's people on the left and the right, all kinds of people don't like the Brexit deal he got, but it happened and we left in January 2020. And I was talking about binning off Simple Politics at that time because he had a massive majority and was just going to ride off into the sunset. I didn't think I was needed after all the Brexit chaos. Obviously, 2 months later, Boris Johnson was sat at his desk in Downing Street telling us all we had to stay inside because the pandemic had hit.
You must stay at home.
And that meant that he had to spend lots of money, and it meant all kinds of things. He managed to be quite popular through the beginning. When he went to hospital, some people were genuinely worried about him. And he was on our tellies a lot, and it was fine, and it was okay. And it began to get tricky, but then the vaccine rollout came, and we really did smash the vaccine rollout. But then stories about partying happened. And it happened towards the end of the pandemic anyway, so people were fed up of lockdown, and a lot more people were vocal about not believing in lockdown. People were vocal about not believing in the vaccines. Whenever I speak to people about why they don't like politics now, they talk about Partygate. Partying. And that's the problem. He had to go. He went. And that was a low for the Conservative Party. So they needed a really safe pair of hands to take over, to keep them meaningful and keep them real. They needed someone solid and who would really make people happy. And what they got was Liz Truss. Now, I'm not going to say Liz Truss crashed the economy because she'll take me to court.
I do want to challenge this phrase, crash the economy.
But Liz Truss crashed the economy. At the same time as other factors. There were clearly other factors at play, and the Bank of England were involved, quantitative easing, blah, 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 blah. Of course they were, don't at me. But her choices crashed the economy. And then so she went, and then Rishi Sunak came in, and Rishi Sunak was just, the dice were loaded from the start for Rishi Sunak. We were in massive amounts of debt. The party was deeply, deeply, deeply unpopular. The whole thing was a mess. So we had the election. Everyone knew he was going to lose the election. I mean, and then he lost it by miles and 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 miles. So we then had another leadership contest for the Conservative Party. Everyone knew it was going to be James Cleverly after he made a really great speech at conference. Everyone knew. But then he didn't make it into the final two, probably because people were voting tactically, because everyone had a different idea. It's such a mess. It's such a mess, this party right now. And we got Kemi Badenoch rather than Robert Jenrick. And Kemi Badenoch doesn't have much of a mandate. She's not got a load of MPs. She says no policies for the next couple of years while they sort themselves out. But then the other day, they published a policy which could have been a reform policy, presumably because they're worried about reform. Reform are way ahead of them in the polls. They're clearly much more energy and enthusiasm around them. Kemi Badenoch's kind of flailing around at PMQs most weeks. Some weeks she does all right, but she's generally not managed to land anything. They aren't forming the opposition right now. Keir Starmer is not worried by them at all. Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, loves to get cross at the dispatch box, but nobody's listening. Now, like I say, this country loves the Conservative Party. They're going to come back. They will regroup. Will it take another leader? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe Kemi Badenoch can really step into it and get things going. Last time Conservatives came out of government, William Hague, Michael Howard, Ian Duncan Smith all came and went before they found David Cameron, who was an election winner. Are they going to take more than one term? Kemi Badenoch comes and goes. They lose the next election. They get somebody else in. Maybe James Cleverly. Or maybe someone new, maybe Chris Philp. He definitely wants to be the leader. Maybe Robert Jenrick. He ran for leader last time. Then they're looking for a 2034 victory. Or maybe Reform are going to do so well, Nigel Farage does win the next election, in which case the Conservatives are in real trouble as the third party in Parliament. They need to pull themselves together, sing from the same hymn sheet, be clear what they stand for, and be clear why they're better than Reform. Because Reform are making really clear arguments as to why they're better than Conservatives. Conservatives need to find themselves again, back themselves, pull themselves together, and offer the Labour Party clear opposition that is being listened to and that matters. The country is a better place when you have good opposition in Parliament. So we need the Conservative Party to get that done. Let's go, Conservatives.